My name is Elena Harper. I'm 37, and I've stitched up strangers at 3 in the morning without my hands ever shaking. A year after my divorce, I was finishing a shift near the maternity ward when my ex-mother-in-law spotted me by the elevators. Linda Caldwell had a way of smiling that still carried old worries, but this time she walked up with something softer in her eyes. She spoke just loud enough for the nurses to hear. Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. Now he has a baby boy with your best friend. 6 years of being called the broken one, wrapped in a single breath. I didn't flinch. I looked at her with the same steady calm I use in the trauma bay and said, "Is that what you believe?" 5 minutes later, a man no one expected walked through those doors, and a truth nobody wanted to face was about to come gently into the light. Welcome back to stories where quiet hearts face hard moments, and kindness and truth find their way home in the end. If heartwarming tales of resilience and second chances are your thing, settle in. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up 5 minutes, because the smile came before the man did. It was a Thursday near the end of a long 12-hour shift. I was handing off a chart to a night nurse named Jamie when I cut through the maternity wing. Linda was there visiting, of course. Sophie had delivered 3 weeks earlier, and half the town had been stopping by with balloons and warm casseroles. I'd braced myself for it. What I hadn't expected was Linda stepping gently into my path. She looked me over my scrubs, my tired eyes, and her chin lifted just a little. Then she said her piece about her son, the new baby boy, and Sophie. Jamie went quiet beside me. A passing aide slowed her steps. I felt my thumb find the thin gold watch on my wrist, the one that had belonged to my grandmother, and press against it the way I always had when waiting out something heavy. I didn't raise my voice. I'd learned long ago that the kindest voice in the room often holds the most strength. Is that what you believe? I asked again, softer this time. Linda blinked, surprised by the calm. She'd expected tears or anger. She got neither. And somewhere down the hall, a set of doors hissed open. Here's the thing you should know about me. I grew up in a small farm town in southern Ohio where everybody's business felt like gospel. My mother cleaned houses. My father drove a feed truck until his back gave out. I worked 2 jobs through college and 2 more through medical school. I learned to keep my head down and let good work speak for itself. That simple belief carried me through the hardest shifts. You fix what's in front of you, stay steady, and move forward with care. The clean cotton and antiseptic smell of the hospital always settled me. It was the place where I felt most like myself, capable, needed, never called broken. I could run a code, set a shoulder, or talk a scared child through stitches without my pulse rising. But that same steadiness had a quiet side. I carried things alone. When people started telling a story about me that wasn't true, I trusted that staying kind and quiet would be enough. I married Ryan Caldwell when I was 28. He was charming, the kind of man who made people feel seen. We wanted children and tried for a long time. When nothing happened, the empty space sat gently between us. After 2 years, I suggested we both get tested. Simple, routine. Ryan laughed it off at first, then grew uncomfortable. He said Caldwell men didn't have those problems, and that we should leave it in God's hands. I pushed gently once or twice, then let it go. I got tested myself. My results were completely normal. I sat in my car reading the paper, relieved and confused. If it wasn't me, then what? I didn't have an answer, and the longer I stayed quiet, the easier it became for others to write their own. Ryan began whispering to his mother that maybe the trouble was with me. Linda, who had raised him alone and poured her whole heart into believing he was perfect, picked up the story with love and worrying. It started small, sympathetic sighs at potlucks, gentle words of pity. Then it grew. At a church supper, she introduced me to a visiting pastor's wife with practiced kindness. This is Elena, my daughter-in-law. She's a doctor. Such a shame about the children. The woman gave me a sad nod. I stood there in my good dress holding a paper plate while Linda patted my hand. "Some women just aren't built for it," she said softly, believing every word because her son had told her. I drove home and said nothing to Ryan. I was still hoping the truth would sort itself out. Sophie Lang had been my best friend since we were 15. She was the one I called when my father passed, the one who cried at my wedding. When the church talk hurt, she came over with wine and kind words. "You're so accomplished." "Elena, maybe that's just not your path." "Ryan adores you." Her comfort always landed on the same tender spot. I didn't notice then how her eyes sometimes drifted to Ryan, or how she knew details about his days I hadn't shared. I was too grateful to have one person who didn't seem to judge me. Ryan filed for divorce on a Tuesday. I came home to a manila envelope and half-empty closets. By the weekend, he had moved in with Sophie. The story that spread was gentle but heavy. Eleanor was married to her job. Too cold for family life, couldn't give him children. Linda made sure the pews heard it. Sophie stayed quiet. I didn't fight it. I went to work the next morning, set a teenager's broken arm, and told him he'd be fine. That felt like the truest thing I did all week. If you've ever swallowed a story about yourself to keep the peace, you know how heavy that silence can feel. But something inside me started to shift when the same whispers reached my hospital. I'd been in line for years to lead the emergency department. I'd built the trauma protocols half the county used. Then the credentialing committee heard the rumors about my unstable personal life. The position went to someone else. That night in my car, I realized my quiet patients had cost more than I could keep carrying. A trusted nurse gave me the name of a lawyer, Laura Bennett. Laura's office sat above a hardware store. She listened with steady kindness as I told her everything. When I finished, she said gently, "What you're describing might be defamation. It won't be easy, but sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is let the truth have its day." I thought about it for 2 weeks. I made lists of what I might lose and what I could gain. In the end, I chose my name, my work, and the simple fact that I had done nothing wrong. This wasn't about hurting Ryan. It was about no longer carrying a lie that never belonged to me. Laura drafted the complaint with care. When it was filed, the news moved through town quickly. Linda was upset. Ryan stayed quiet. Sophie too. I kept showing up to work and let the law move at its own gentle pace. Their defense claimed the statements were true, that the trouble really had been mine. Laura's eyes brightened. "Now they have to prove it," she said. "And that opens doors." They took that road. Laura filed a motion for Ryan's relevant medical records. After some resistance, the judge granted it under a protective order. The records arrived 8 days later. 7 years earlier, Ryan had been diagnosed with a condition that made fathering a biological child nearly impossible. The same week he'd come home quiet and moody, the whispers about me had begun. I sat very still as Laura shared the news. No fireworks, just a long, quiet exhale. The wound I'd carried for 6 years had never been mine. Grief and relief washed over me together. Then came the bigger question. The healthy baby boy everyone believed was Ryan's could not biologically be his. Sophie's late-night text, "Please don't do this. Think about the baby," suddenly made painful sense. A man named Alex Marino walked into the hospital that day. He had quiet questions of his own and had been gently piecing things together. When he stepped through the doors, Sophie's face changed. The perfect picture Linda had been holding began to soften in the light of truth. I didn't go digging into anyone's private life. The child was innocent. What mattered was the contradiction the defense had created. In court, Laura laid everything out calmly, one piece at a time. The statements, the harm, the records. The gentle contradiction of the baby everyone had celebrated. The room grew quiet. Linda looked pale. Ryan sat with his head down. I stood once, voice steady and kind. "You're right. Linda, one person in that marriage wasn't built to have children. But it was never me." No shouting. Just truth spoken where it counted. The church women lowered their eyes. Linda left smaller, carrying her own hurt. Sophie and Alex began working things out through the courts with care for the little boy. In the weeks that followed, the hospital board quietly offered me the leadership role again. I took it not for victory, but because it was work I loved and had earned. My first week back in charge, the familiar hospital smell felt warmer, like coming home to a place that finally saw me clearly. Mark moved away to start fresh. Linda stepped back from the women's circle. I wrote her a short note. I won't carry your son's story anymore. You shouldn't either. I didn't expect a reply. And none came, but writing it set something free in me. I still wear my grandmother's watch. Patience isn't just waiting, she used to say. It's knowing the right moment when it comes. I waited 7 years, met that moment with steady hands and an open heart, and finally set down the weight I'd never been meant to carry. If you've ever been told you were the broken one, let this be your reminder. The truth doesn't shout. It waits patiently for the day you're ready to speak it with kindness. Then you can walk forward lighter into the life that was always yours. That's my story. 6 years of a name that was never mine. And one quiet question that helped everything find its way home. If it touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.